Right, good afternoon everybody. As Miriam said, I'm Julian Hargreaves, Director of Research here, and I'd like to introduce you to the second stage of a major project being undertaken here at the Woolf Institute, the Woolf Diversity Study. I'm calling it 2023 because we anticipate that the next report will be published in early 2023. So in a nutshell, the Woolf Diversity Study is a large-scale social science project. It implements innovative methods, and it aims to say something interesting and possibly even useful about contemporary British society. Now, like all large-scale social science projects that use innovative methods that aim to say something useful about contemporary British society, the most obvious place to start is in the court of Quirinius in the 1st century. Now, this is a Byzantine mosaic depicting an event which may or may not have happened of the court welcoming Mary and Joseph to Bethlehem. So, a question for you all to wake you up after your cake. Why, according to the Gospel of St. Luke, were Mary and Joseph in Bethlehem? Any historians, theologians? Quite right. So, what were they doing?
Oh, everyone had to go back to their native land and their Roman census.
That's right. They were filling in a survey.
Yes.
Now, this is important. This is important for two reasons, ladies and gentlemen. The first is that I'm often held accountable not only for my own work, which puts me in quite a difficult spot often, but also for the whole of statistics. Often when it comes down to issues of identity and community and diversity and cohesion, integration, people argue that statistical methods aren't the best methods possible, that perhaps ethnography can solve these problems, or perhaps newfangled methods aren't applicable at all. Maybe history and philosophy and theology can help us. But it's not modern gibberish, to use statistics, and they're at least 2,000 years old. There's another reason, though, of course, in that if filling in a survey was good enough for the Virgin Mary, mother of Son of God, then it's probably good for the rest of us. Now, the other criticism I get is that the use of statistics is part of a neoliberal project designed to oppress us, Western hegemony and hegemony and all the rest of it. So what I would say is please meet Al-Kindi, born in the 9th century, polymath, mathematician, someone who actually proposed the statistical study of text, believe it or not. The other criticism I get is that maybe some from feminist scholars, whom I have a huge deal of admiration for, but they say that statistics are a tool of patriarchal society, and I would say, well, without statistics, we wouldn't have discovered the gender pay gap. So now we're all agreed that survey methods are ancient and sacred, a universal human trait, and an undeniable force for social good, we can continue. So in 2020 we published the Woolf Diversity Study, and we had 5 main themes across the report: diversity, change, friendship, workplace and marriage. And one of the difficulties in doing these statistical studies is that the findings don't always line up neatly against your assumptions, and it creates sort of complicated, frustrating sort of findings. So I'm going to give you a couple here before I introduce you to the new study. So we asked our respondents, do you agree or disagree that religious diversity is good for British society? And in this pie chart here, we have both a good and bad news story. So the good news story, the one we emphasised in the report actually, was that nearly twice as many people agreed than disagreed that religious diversity is in fact good for British society. But the bad news is, of course, that less than a majority agreed. So this isn't a sort of a consensus or a majority. Also, and typically for a sensitive question like this, we had 38% who sort of avoided the question, neither agreed nor disagreed, or don't know. What were they thinking? We can't tell. All it tells us is that this is a sensitive topic. A slightly more, a bad news story really is that less than the majority agree. Nearly over twice as many agree and disagree that religious diversity in Britain has increased too quickly in the past 10 years. So On the one hand, we've got a large group of people who think that diversity is generally a good thing. On the other hand, we've got an equally large proportion of people across England and Wales who think that change is happening too quickly around them. This again creates a sort of tension that we need to explore. So on to the new study. Being honest, we made a couple of mistakes we've learned from for this study, so we're developing our methods and approach. I think we were too late in the process taking the data to parliamentarians and policymakers. So this year to remedy that, we worked with a policy consultant and we talked to people across different government departments, we talked to think tanks, other academics, commentators, journalists, all kinds of people to really try and infuse sort of more utility within the project this year. And a big change this year from last year is that we have with us the Levelling Up agenda launched by the government. Now, for better or worse, this is the main sort of social integration and cohesion project, policy project, with lots of money being allocated to it. And whilst we're not doing the government's bidding or sort of tethering ourselves too tightly to the Levelling Up agenda, we did want to make it applicable for some of the government's thinking at the moment. So what do I mean by that? Well, we chose the theme of belonging to sort of map across England and Wales. We've surveyed just over 10,000 people. It's the second largest survey of diversity in England and Wales. The largest was the last study we did, and the reason why we've dropped the numbers this time is to focus more of our resources on some of the local mapping techniques that I'm going to talk you through. And again, we've focused on England and Wales, but we'll also be introducing some case studies from Scotland to increase the geography. So how do we go about measuring belonging? There are various ways, and I'm sure we could all come up with interesting ideas here, but we're focused on these three sort of pillars of local belonging. So let me walk you through them. The first one is local trust. And this might be a good thought experiment for people in the room. We asked the question, how many people living locally to you do you know well enough to ask for a favour? So how many people living close to you do you know well enough to ask for a favour? We might sort of try and count up, and what we found, because the data have come back, so I'm going to give you something of an exclusive, what we found was that there's a small group of people who have quite a number of people that can ask for a favour who live locally, but for the majority of us, in fact, a vast majority of us, the average is around 4 people who live locally we can ask for a favour in England and Wales. Now, we asked the same question with sort of 2 variations. We asked, how many people living locally from a different ethnic group do you know well enough to ask for a favour? And if we separate out the small number of people who have lots and lots of people, the average for the vast majority of us is 0 people. 0 people we know well enough from a different ethnic group. The number goes up by 1 when we asked how many people living locally from a different faith group do you know well enough to ask for a favour. So the figures are sort of depressingly small. And I would say that what's being shown here perhaps is a different kind of diversity that we might see on public transport or celebrated by parliamentarians. And maybe what we're seeing here is the actual level of trust between us as individuals and groups. The next pillar of belonging is what we're calling civic engagement. And the reason why we chose this is because lots of academic literature has talked about the importance of volunteering. And that comes up in the Levelling Up agenda, it comes up across journal articles, reports, books written about these types of things. I was slightly sceptical about the role of volunteering on the basis that if you've got 3 kids and 2 jobs, then you're probably not going to have much time. Well, if you've got 3 kids, you're probably not going to have much time for volunteering. Also, I wanted to prod this a little bit to find out if other forms of civic engagement were as popular, as frequently engaged with. So we looked at membership of a local group on social media, we've looked at membership of other forms of local groups, and I'll give you the findings as they come out. And then finally, we surveyed what we're calling community priorities. So again, lots of the literature and some of the policymakers place a lot of emphasis on things like access to arts and culture, or things like this. And I just wondered if that was the case, and we did a round table up in Manchester where we had an arts group on one side of the table saying this stuff's really important for Manchester. People on the other side of the table saying, well, actually in Rochdale, this stuff's not so important, and the things that people think are important in Rochdale are cleaner and safer streets. So we've decided to test it, given that policymakers don't often ask members of the public about this stuff, so developing a ranking of priorities. And I have to say, for anyone who knows Maslow's hierarchy of needs, our data maps almost perfectly onto it. So we've got things like crime, health, clean streets at the top, and arts and culture, better intergroup relations, sort of much lower down the bottom. So next steps, this is where I'll wrap up. We've got a lot of data analysis to do. The report comes out in 2023 and we'll make the data available freely to all. Thank you.